Yes, people, how are we all doing? Hope everyone's fit and well. And welcome to another edition of Prison News, where I do a roundup of daily news relating to prison. So the first one I'm going to talk about is HMP Berwyn. And this one's popped up a couple of times. Well, this prison's actually popped up a couple of times because of it's made the headlines because of what's going on in there. Now, HMP Berwyn is down in Wales, and it is a massive prison. So let's start. So men's jail given 1 out of 5 in food hygiene ratings. Now I think HMP Berwyn is a relatively new prison, or it looks like it, and it's a massive prison. I can't remember the exact amount. I'll maybe go over it in a minute, how many people or how many lads that the prison holds. But it says a men's jail where there's been a string of affairs involving guards, which I'm going to talk about next, and inmates has another problem with food hygiene. HMP Berwyn, a modern prison at Wrexham, has been told major improvement was needed in hygienic handling of food, including cooking and storage, and with management of food safety. The jail has become notorious because of flings between young women guards and inmates. But last month it was given a food hygiene rating of just 1 out of 5. Now, prison food, as you would probably expect, is disgusting anyway. There's a lot of people say in the news, especially when it comes up to Christmas, about the 5-course meals that inmates get at Christmas. They're living better than what people are on the outside. But if you were in there and you sampled the food yourself, you would see it different. So if you're getting a hygiene rating of 1 out of 5, when prisons that have got a 5 out of 5 are disgusting to start with, this has just got to be beyond a joke, a 1 out of 5. If that was happening on the outside, the place of business or whatever that was serving the food would probably be shut down. The prison service said improvements have been made. A spokesman said HMP Berwyn has addressed concerns highlighted in this inspection with extra supervision of servery areas, increased management checks, improved protocols around food storage and the repair of equipment. But again, because it's a prison, it'll be put to the back of the pile, and they'll do something to maybe try and cover it up. And I can't see it improving very much, to be honest with you. So this leads us on to the next story, which I was going to cover a couple of weeks ago, because like I've mentioned, HMP Berwyn has been popping up a few times in this newsfeed app that I keep getting daily updates on. And one of them was on about the gang culture, because there's loads of Scousers and Manx being shipped down there, and there's like gang rivalry going on inside the prison. But the headline for this one is, inside Britain's sex scandal jail, former prison officer and inmate lift the lid on the £250 million HMP Berwyn, where 18 female guards have been fired or left for illicit affairs with convicts in just 6 years. Now, this is just the ones that have been caught, so imagine how many over 6 years. If there's been 18 fired, there must be about another, well, however many female guards there is, but I can imagine the number is much more than what this is. The epidemic of sex and smuggling scandals at HMP Berwyn, dubbed Britain's cushiest jail, is a result of naive, vulnerable and poorly educated staff, a prison training manager and an inmate have revealed. So like I've mentioned previously, when they're bringing these young guards in, or screws, at 21-year-old who are looking for a job, they're out of work, and they've been offered this probably by the job centre, saying, why don't you go and be a trainee prison officer? And they're given a few months training and put straight into the job. Now, they're getting put on the wing with hardened criminals, or criminals that have been in prison for 10, 20 years, and they know the system inside out. And these new guards are coming on, and they're just getting what you would call took advantage of, or took for a mug, basically. And they're being offered, because they're probably on crap pay, a few £100 a week, 21-year-old, and they're getting offered a certain amount of money for bringing things in, or there's young lads in there as well, and they're just looking at it as a place of work where they're going in, they're seeing these lads every day, they're interacting with them, and as things do happen, things progress, just like in any place of work, and they start having an affair or they start falling for them. But more times than not, obviously the lads that are in there, if a female screw comes on the wing, she might not even be good looking, she might be quite big, and something that on the outside lads probably wouldn't look twice at her, but because they're in prison and the ladies or the lasses, the female screws, are getting a little bit of attention off the lads, it goes to the head. Because they're not getting attention outside, they're going in, they're getting attention on a daily basis, and sometimes this is how it starts. But it says here, 18 female guards have reportedly been fired or resigned for having illicit sexual affairs with prisoners, some involving smuggling phones and drugs, since the £250 million prison opened 6 years ago. Now that answers what I was on about before when I was saying it's a relatively new prison. And here we go. So set in a sprawling industrial estate in Wrexham, North Wales, the state-of-the-art jail promised to bring a bright future of rehabilitation and training to more than 2,100 medium-risk Category C prisoners. So this is what I was on about, because when I was last in doing my recall, when I was in Home House, I was padded up with a Welsh lad, and he was telling us about this prison. And he was trying to get back down there because he was seeing how cushy the jail actually is. And obviously he meant stuff like this, having an affairs with guards, the prison's rammed full of drugs and phones. And from a prisoner's point of view, this is where prisoners prefer to spend the time, because a lot of lads, or the majority of prisoners, use drugs. They're drug addicts. So they would rather be in a prison that's full of drugs. And this prison is a prime example of that. But it was classed as like not a super max as in high security, but a super max prison because of the amount of people it's in and because it's a brand new jail. It was meant to have been, like it says, state-of-the-art prison, where it's meant to be like a training place where prisoners go to improve themselves and come out reformed. But obviously it doesn't look as if it's going that way. However, many were left in shock after sexually charged criminal trials of 4 young prison guards who all had relationships with prisoners. Now, a prison officer, training manager and a former inmate have both blamed the epidemic in sex and smuggling at HMP Berwyn on naive, vulnerable and poorly educated staff. Reformed armed robber Alex Coxon, 25, condemned HMP Berwyn as a shit show run by corrupt staff who was straight out of Tesco and didn't have a clue. He said that drugs are rife inside the jail, which is run by gangster prisoners who coerce vulnerable prison staff to do their bidding. Where's the next bit? Sorry. Coxon had been serving 8 years in jail for 2 robberies when he was given 10 months more for his role in the smuggling of an illicit mobile phone into the jail by prison officer Jennifer Gavin. Former shop assistant manager Gavan had fallen in love with Coxon and arranged to be alone with him when he was on cleaning duty at the prison. She sent sexually explicit videos of herself to him on a phone she smuggled in for £150. During her trial, the court heard Coxon, who the judge said had an appalling record, had been caught trying to pass a phone to another inmate using dental floss to drag it across a corridor. So what they mean by that is using dental floss. That's when you use what's called a line. So if you've got a wing, pads on this side, pads on the other side. So to get contraband from one side to the other whenever all the prisoners are banged up, you'll probably use a little prison mirror, tie the dental floss to it, fling it under the door, and it goes across the landing into the other pad. And then they tie the illicit stuff, whatever's on the other end of it, and pull it across the landing. But obviously it's been intercepted here. So Coxon denied there were any ulterior motives to his relationships with Gavin. He said me and Jenny wasn't about getting stuff in, it was about spending time together, and then the relationship grew from there. He wouldn't discuss who the phone was for and why he asked Gavin for it. He said, I've done my time and I'm never going back. I've got a job now, I work in construction and I've got a future. Gavin told the court she had felt sorry for Coxon who was struggling with the enforced lockdown during COVID. Her bank account revealed she received 2 transfer payments totaling £200 from Coxon's sister. Gavin was not at the modest address she gave to the court at her trial when asked for her comment, but a relative claimed Jenny was used. In December, mother of one, Gavin broke down in tears when she was jailed for 8 months for misconduct in public office. Coxon's explosive verdict on Britain's flagship jail was almost identically matched by a former prison officer training manager at HMP Berwyn. Where we at? So senior manager John Buttress, who previously worked as a chief inspector for Greater Manchester Police, said the high salary offered at HMP Berwyn to unskilled workers with no life experience was attracting naive, inexperienced and poorly educated staff who could not cope with the grueling dog-eat-dog world behind bars. The people running the jail are amateurs. They don't understand the people they are dealing with and don't have the staff to deal with them. Prisoners at HMP Berwyn can be very manipulative. They are stuck in their cells for 18 hours a day and have nothing better to do than work out how to coerce a prison officer. 18 hours a day, more like 23 hours a day. It starts very gently with something small like a mobile phone card. Once the prisoner has them, they have them hooked. The officer will be blackmailed and soon enough they will be bringing in whatever they are told. Phones, drugs, whatever. There are some very clever and devious men inside the prison. They are very bright, street smart and know how to operate behind bars. A prison is run by the inmates. Make no mistake about that. The flagship prison opened with fanfare. In 2017, it had been running for just 5 months when prison officer Emily Watson arranged at least 3 trysts with her gangster lover Paul McGee. McGee was serving an 8-year sentence for a hit and run after causing the death of charity worker Richard Bratton, 51, during a high-speed police car chase. McGee had been in prison for supplying Class A drugs but was out on licence when in December 2015 he was trying to evade arrest once more, speeding through the streets of Walton, Liverpool and ploughing into Mr. Bratton, who was walking his dog. He then drove off and left him for dead. By October 2017, Watson and McGee had started to communicate via Instagram on an iPhone McGee kept in his cell. Hidden in a PlayStation he opened with a screwdriver disguised as a pen. He had put her contact details under a false name. The pair had virtual sex over FaceTime while CCTV footage showed she had visited McGee's cell alone 3 times. They had sex once and she performed sex acts on him on 2 other occasions, one which was on Christmas Day. Well, he would have loved that, wouldn't he? Christmas Day present from the screw coming into his pad and giving him one. Watson was jailed for 1 year. Mr. Buttress, who was worked in the crime and justice sector for more than 30 years, revealed how female prison officers are seduced. He said a newly recruited prison officer earns in excess of £28,000. For many of them, it's their first proper job, but it does not attract compliments. No one wants to praise them in the pub for being a gowler. So if a naive young woman finds the attention she is lacking inside the prison, this can lead to inappropriate relationships. Just like I mentioned earlier on, the screws are probably going into the prison, putting a bit extra makeup on, loving the job for the simple fact that they're getting attention of 100 and odd horny lads in the prison because that's all they're seeing on a daily basis. And these lasses or screws are falling for it because it's the only attention they're getting and it's going to their head and they end up falling for one of the cons. And whichever lucky con it is, from their point of view, they'll be absolutely buzzing because they've got them and they've got them right where they want them. So it says the jail gangsters assess new arrivals to determine if they can be of any use. Gavin and Watson weren't the only guard couples to have sexual affairs with prisoners. 2018, there's another one. I'm not going into it because it goes on for quite a bit, but this is what's going on a daily basis in the majority of prisons across the country, which you can quietly understand like how it's happening because like I've just mentioned, if you've got lads that are in there for years at a time and they're banged up 23 hours a day they're not getting any attention from females. The females are coming in, and that's the only attention they're getting, and that's where I was going to say a bromance, and that's where the romance blossoms from. But I'll just leave that one now. Leave that one there for now, people. But I will come back to HMP Berwyn because it's in the news quite a lot. But the next one I'm going to talk about is Chelmsford Prison is put on lockdown after prisoner stages protest on the roof. So it says a male prisoner managed to escape to the roof, ordering a deportation. It is understood that Chelmsford was put on lockdown on Saturday morning after a prisoner staged a protest on the roof of one of its buildings. The incident happened around 10:30 a.m. The prisoner was apparently requesting to be deported to Spain, according to a source close to the prison. The prisoner has not been identified following the incident by the prison service. The incident continued until the evening. The prison service has not said that the prisoner will face further charges for the incident. It did say that no one was injured in the incident and that there was no risk to the public during the incident. Now, this is another irregular occurrence in a lot of the prisons. It's happened in a couple of prisons whilst I was observing my time. And they don't get extra charges. They get extra time or they get put down the block. But you don't get extra charges as in attempted escape or anything like that. You'll get put down the block and then you'll get shipped out. But incidents like this is a massive inconvenience for the prison. And like I say, they make an example of them by not deporting them, by shipping them out. And it's more often than not, when it happened in Durham, the lads were getting shipped out right down the country, places where they didn't want to be. But that was the prison service's way of getting back at them, because obviously they've had one over on the prison service by getting up on the roof and causing a massive disturbance. So the way that the screws or the governors get back at the prisoner is by shipping them off, and more times than not, it's right down the bottom of the country. Or if it happens down London, down the bottom of the country, they ship them right up here, up north. But it happened in Durham when I was in there. The lad got up on the roof. They had the fire brigade and everything in, where they had to put big inflatables on the floor, and people were passing stuff up out the windows, giving him food and all that. And he was up there for probably about 7 or 8 hours. But like I say, the whole jail gets put on lockdown, causes a massive inconvenience. All lads are out the windows shouting on. The majority of them are cheering him on because he's managed to get up on the roof and have one over on them. But it's extremely hard to get up on the roofs. But there is the odd few people that manage to get up. But whilst they're getting up on the roof, they're actually putting their lives at risk. Because Durham Prison, the height of that, when the lad climbed up on the roof there, if he fell from there, he would be dead instantly because it's that high up. So it's dangerous what they're doing. But again, just to get a bit over onto the prison system, that's what some of the lads actually do. It says here, in a statement, a prison service spokesman said staff worked to resolve an incident at HMP and YOI Chelmsford, where a prisoner was at heights at HMP Chelmsford. The prisoner is no longer up and no one has been injured. Thanks to the efforts of our staff, the incident at HMP Chelmsford was safely resolved. But I'm not sure who the prisoner is, like it's mentioned, but he's Spanish and he's wanting to be deported. But if he's waiting to go up on trial or sentence and anything like that, he won't be deported. But I did see a while back that prisoners were getting offered £1,500 to get deported back to their own countries, and they were getting early release. So I'll just do one more story here, and this one is up in Scotland, I believe. And the headline on this one is, suicidal prisoners put in torture cells instead of given care, an inquiry has been told. Professor Linda Allen's 21-year-old daughter, Katie, died in Polmont Young Offenders Institution in 2018. The mother of a woman who took her own life at Polmont Young Offenders Institution says suicidal prisoners are placed in torture cells rather than being given therapeutic care. Now, Polmont, obviously up in Scotland, is the only young offender prisons up in Scotland, but I hadn't realised, I thought it was just a male prison, but it's obviously females and males. But Professor Linda Allen, whose 21-year-old daughter Katie died in 2018, gave a lengthy statement to the Scottish Child Abuse Inquiry as it investigates abuse in young offenders institutions. While Katie did not die in one of these safe cells, Professor Allen said prisoners are reluctant to admit mental health difficulties due to the conditions they will be placed in as a result. Her statement described how Katie suffered bullying at Polmont and how she had tried to help her daughter in the weeks before her death. Professor Allen has been conducting research into prison deaths as well as campaigning for reform. She told Lady Smith's inquiry that there has been an astounding increase in suicides in custody despite a new strategy to reduce them being introduced in 2016. Now, suicides in prison is actually rife, especially down here in England. And I've mentioned previously about the IPP prisoners, which makes up a big portion of the ones that have committed suicide. There's been over 80 IPP prisoners committed suicide. The consultant nurse, who has an honorary professorship at Glasgow University, did not appear in person at the inquiry in Edinburgh, but her statement was read out by a member of the inquiry team. Professor Allen said Katie had been part of a normal family in East Renfrewshire and had been studying geography at Glasgow University. In 2018, she was convicted of dangerous driving and driving under the influence of alcohol after an incident where a 15-year-old boy was knocked down. She was a first-time offender and her family did not expect her to receive a custodial sentence. Professor Allen said when she was sentenced, she turned to me and mouthed, "Help me, Mum." It was horrendous. She said Katie first experienced bullying from another woman at Polmont who demanded coffee and cigarettes from her. When this woman was moved elsewhere, other young offenders turned on Katie as the woman had been supplying drugs to them. She said her daughter was petrified of most of the prison officers and did not want to confide in them. Prison activities eroded her sense of self-esteem, with Professor Allen saying Katie studied geography. She was given a map of the world and told to colour it in. She said those who are prison-wise in custody will not tell prison staff that they have suicidal thoughts, as the safe cells for suicide observation are so sparse, with prisoners having their clothes and personal items removed. She said if someone is suicidal when they need is a therapeutic environment, instead of what happens is they are put in a torture cell. Now, these suicidal cells, what they're on about, they're called constant watch cells, and it's got a perspex glass door, and an officer sits outside your door constantly, so you've got no privacy, and there's not very many of them in the prisons. When I was in Home House, there was one cell on the whole wing that was for suicide watch, and it had the perspex door on, and it's degrading and shameful because you're on a normal location wing, and there's just the one with a perspex door, which makes you look like, when you first go on, it's something that you would see when you hear about Robert Maudsley and his glass cell, and everyone's looking and saying, what's that for, or who's in there? You think it's a dangerous prisoner, but it's actually somebody who's trying to take their own life and they're on constant watch. So they're inside there. So when they come out, the whole of the wing's looking at them to see who it is. So instead of getting help, it's actually making them worse, so I can understand exactly where they're coming from here. Her statement also described Katie's feeling of degradation during strip searches following family visits. We think if Katie had access to a phone, then she would still be alive. On the last day Professor Allen saw her daughter, Katie had not slept in 3 days and was upset in the visitor area. She said that all through the night the other prisoners had been shouting insults at her, with some saying she might as well top herself. Professor Allen told a prison officer about this, and later Katie found out that she would be moved in with adult female prisoners upstairs at Polmont. She was found dead in her cell the next day. Professor Allen said that since Katie's death, her family have been on a 5-year journey of bureaucracy and further trauma. She said 5 years on and still no accountability for Katie's death. After researching deaths in custody, she said it is astounding that suicide in Scottish prisons have increased by 40% since a prevention strategy called Talk to Me was introduced. Inquiry Counsel James Peoples KC read him a preview of Professor Allen's evidence, which he said was very moving, and the events she described are absolutely tragic. He said the safe cells Professor Allen described bore similarities to those he encountered in Glen Oakhill in the 1980s. Dr. Chiswick added, "I'm surprised that they are still using isolation cells like that for people who might have mental health symptoms. So like I've just mentioned there, putting people who are suicidal in pads like this that's shared with other prisoners is just degrading. There's a lot of people like Katie in prison who are suicidal. They're not cut out for prison. She was a young lass, drink driving. She didn't mean to do what she'd done. People like that should be given a second chance, given more probation, given time to maybe go and sit with the victims, apologise and tell how sorry they really are, instead of putting them in prison like this and in the end killing themselves. Because what a tragic end to a young lass's life. Someone that's got a professor for a mother, not in the criminal lifestyle, being put in there with a load of criminals and being tortured and bullied. And this is what happens in prisons. I've seen it firsthand. Bullying is rife in the prisons. And if you're not cut out for prison and you don't stick up for yourself, you're going to find yourself in this sorry situation where the only way out for you is in a wooden box. So more needs to be done for people like this. And if they are putting people like this in prison, who do deserve a second chance, people that have never been in trouble with the police before, give them another chance and give them the help they need, because she's come from a good family and she's ended up dead. So I can only imagine how the mother feels when she feels so lost or trapped, knowing that she can't help her daughter who's stuck in prison and getting bullied off the older prisoners. And it's probably the ones that have got nothing, that need a bit extra money for themselves, and the only way they can get it is by bullying the other inmates. And ultimately, she's went and killed herself and took her own life. But anyways, people, that's it for today's prison news. Hopefully you enjoyed that big content. But if you do, remember to like, comment and subscribe. And thank you very much to all my subscribers who are already subscribed to the channel. And thanks to all my Patreon members. But I'll leave that one there for now, people. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.